you can control that platform movement.
Right.
And, not have to have artificial coloration from the geometry.
Right. Not even drinking any whiskey and I'm losing my C's.
The Mike way, and you do a whole new suspension. There's something called anti-dive geometry.
Yep.
And so, if you draw the vectors of where the suspension attaches to the body and the tire contact patch, so under braking, it actually causes a upward lifting moment.
Okay.
And so that counteracts the car's tendency to dive under braking.
Okay.
But then it's also kind of adding almost like not exactly a bind, but it's an opposing force.
Sure, because the front of the car is trying to come down, and we've got the moment from the suspension arms trying to push it back up.
Right, and it has the same effect as increasing the spring rate.
Right.
So you could oversaturate the tire and go into understeer, and if you're trail braking, that's the opposite of what you kind of want to happen.
Correct.
And
then guys are going to want to fight that with a wider tire or reducing anti-roll bar stiffness or other things that are technically potentially the wrong thing to be troubleshooting.
And a lot of guys don't agree with me that are pretty smart guys.
Sure.
I'm not saying I'm always right, but I always like to take the out of street car suspension.
Sure.
Because, and one of my things is, you look at prototypes and F1 cars and open wheelers, they don't have anti.
Right. Right.
And
they also don't have amateur drivers trying to drive them fast.
Well, I think the factories put anti-dive and anti-squat into their suspension geometries, so they don't have cars going like this under acceleration and like that under
especially with the soft springs that they
soft springs and everything.
Yeah. Soft street car springs and such.
But, with much more sophisticated shocks, you can control that platform movement.
Right.
And, not have to have artificial coloration from the geometry.
Right.
So the car will respond more purely to weight transfer and
you can also get it dialed in more purely as well once you have the freedom with the variables available to you inside the shock.
That's why the thing next door doesn't have any anti-geometry.
Which one day when we get this orange thing behind me actually running and driving, then we can transfer some of the things to that one. So
it runs and drives.
It does. It just likes to kick it out into neutral on occasion.
Yeah, it throws a fit every now and then.
Yeah, it just throws a fit. Got to turn it off. It's okay, baby. You're fine. Our squirrel projects are anybody who's done long-term projects that have not been done before. No one's done it before. Will understand that it's very difficult to put a timeline on those. It's very, very difficult to put a timeline on those because you don't know what you don't know. Even when you have some of the best people in the world working on it, you still don't know what the fuck you don't know. And until you figure it out, then you do know, and then you can fix it. But until then, it's open-ended.
We should explain what negative camber does because we
kind of skipped over that. We assumed that everybody knows what that is. What does negative camber do?
So negative camber is if you're looking at the front of the car, it's like tilting the wheels inward. Mm-hmm. And the reason why you want to do that is when you go around the corner and apply lateral load to the tire, the tread distorts and the tire flexes inward like that. Mm-hmm. And, you actually lift the tread on the inside and put a lot of weight on the outside.
Right.
So you're losing effective contact patch. And, a lot of people probably experience this in some shitty stock.
Yep.
Econobox, you hook it in the turn, and it just goes.
Yeah, just goes straight. You're turning, and the car's still going straight.
And you tear the outside corners of the tires off.
Yep.
So, on your performance car, you want to give it negative camber. So when you go into a turn and put lateral load, it actually lays the contact patch out flat.
Yeah.
And, the weights distributed evenly across the contact patch.
Right.
And you're using the whole thing. That's one thing that, helps your cornering grip. The other thing is a phenomenon called camber thrust.
Mm-hmm.
So the force of bending the tire and flattening it out under a side load. It also creates, the tire's elastic, right?
Yep.
So it also creates a pushing force toward the inside. So the more laden outside side of the car gets pushed to the inside. And it's usually, on a car like a Porsche with wide tires and stiff sidewalls, it could be like 400 pounds pushing the nose of the car inward to the turn.
Okay.
And that's something like a lot of people don't know about or understand.
Right. Yeah, that's certainly an advanced topic because it's a little counterintuitive to think that the car is turning, which means that, as far as our force diagram goes, it's in contact with the ground. Car's trying to go this way, but the road is pushing back the other way. And so now the car is pushing there is an additional force pushing the car against where its mass is trying to swing out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the inertia of your energy's going straight, and now you're trying to change direction.
Right.
All while gravity's sucking you down.
Correct.
Yeah, the three forces at play.
Indeed.
Which is why drifting works.
Right.
So people don't know about camber thrust, but, if you have a race tire manufacturer, you can request the camber thrust curve, and they have that documented. So
that's interesting.
See that
I didn't know.
Is that other graph that Yokohama has that I haven't read before?
Probably.
Okay, I've seen that.
Yokohama makes that data available.
Yeah.
And
that's nice.
They have it on their A005 page, and I've looked at it, but I've never actually looked at it. But I've looked at it, but
and you can kind of see that. The more negative camber you get, the more camber thrust, but then it rolls off at a certain point.
Yeah, there's probably a point of no return where it just falls off a cliff.
Shoots up a cliff.
So
slips off a cliff.
That completes the circle of explaining how we're talking about camber this, camber that.
Indeed. So let's flip it to the rear of the car. We've been pretty much only talking about the front so far, and I want to pick on our friend the Cayman for a minute.
Okay.
And since 911s and Caymans shared similar suspension in the front for a long time, many believe they are equivalent, and it's unfortunate because a Cayman also has McPherson strut in the rear. And the thing that we found with our Caymans that is one of the most difficult things to deal with on that car, and many people who try to tune them to go fast have found this, is a phenomenon called bump steer. And bump steer is where the toe is changing dynamically as the rear tire is moving towards the chassis or away from the chassis. And it's particularly severe in the Cayman chassis. And I wanted to try and help people understand the why of that. So we kind of already went through what a McPherson strut is, so they can review that. So kind of the same thing, but in the rear of the car. And we don't have any steering arms, so we don't have to worry about steering the car. But it still does steer.
And the reason for that is the toe link goes through a different arc than the other links.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. So, the length is different, and how it sits in
angle is different. Yeah. So if you were able to put an equivalent length toe link in the same plane, then you would minimize bump steer.
So in the McPherson strut car, you kind of want to make it in plane with the lower control arm or the control arm. That's probably the easiest way to do it.
Is there such a thing as an offset toe link that is out of plane that would minimize bump steer?
Yeah, you could just use different misalignment spacers.
Sure. But doesn't that just move the curve around, not necessarily change the amount of curve?
It does, but what you could do is make it so it toes in under compression or something.
Sure,
so
it's not going out and in.
Yeah.
So what we found with our cars, because we did experiment with this, and Charles did try to, we'll use the word fix it.
Yeah, fix/reduce.
Reduce. Not even drinking any whiskey, and I'm losing my C's. And what we found was, I'd say the most economical and reasonable way was actually to limit the amount of travel the rear end goes through with a powerful damper.
Yeah, that's one way.
Yep.
Another way is you can mess with your misalignments and put it in the more friendly part of the curve.
Sure.
The other way is
that happened as well. But
the Mike way, and you do a whole new suspension.
We tried that, but we have to drill holes in the engine to make it work.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate. Mike really wanted to see that particular car when he was here today, but we don't have that car anymore. We had to sell it. So to be able to get this car.
Then the 986s and 987s, they have a whole bunch of anti-squat in the back.
Yeah.
So I think they'll probably wheel hop under certain conditions.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah, they do.
And then squirt sideways under throttle.
Right. Yep. They do that too.
And they lack wheel travel too. So they bottom out under roll.
Are we talking 996 GT2s? Sounds like it.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
I've checked all those boxes and avoided a wall a couple times.
So now that we picked on the Cayman a little bit, and you guys can understand why it's handicapped, because the rear of the car is pointing in directions non-favorable to the direction of going around the corner, because the back of the car wants to go away from the turning direction when you're going around. At least one half of the back of the car does. The other half does. And it just gets very confused and wants to spin out. Let's talk about multi-link, which is what all the 911s have had since the 993.
Correct.
They're my favorite suspensions to hate on in the way.
Yeah. All right.
Because usually multi-links are designed to do different things kinematically. Like a lot of them might toe out at first when you first go into the turn to help rotate the car.
Sure.
And then as you get into the turn and load up the suspension, they toe in.
Yep.
And that's one thing. But then when you lower the car, it gets all messed up. So it's in the part of the curve where it just toes out.
Just toes out the whole time.
Or something like that. Or toes out for a lot of the suspension travel.
So that's like the 993 kinematic toe, right?
Yeah, that's adjustable on that one over a certain range. But if you dump it, then it just, it's not happy.
Irrecoverable. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a line with those that if you just dump them, they don't drive good.
Got it.
And the other thing, too, is they have a lot of squishy rubber bushings, so they flex around. But then because you have 3 degrees of freedom of movement, and they're designed like that, so if you put stiff bushings, you create a structure instead of a linkage.
Right.
And so the suspension binds up solid.
Okay.
Or like it has this extra wheel rate that you're getting somehow because of the bind.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And generally, the manufacturers put tons of anti-squat in there, so they tend to wheel hop.
Right.
I think that's a stupid trend, like maybe in the mid-90s, like super anti and multi-link rears. And those cars like wheel hop and
these do it still.
It's gnarly.
Yeah. That's why they have traction control now to try and keep them from doing that.
It's like, I don't know, I think engineers playing around with their computer modeling, but they don't understand what they're doing exactly.
It would seem sometimes. Right?
Hey, let's try this. Sure. Let's just
ship it.
Done.
We got it done. Ship it.
Or we want a car that doesn't squat, even with super stiff springs. So let's design the suspension geometry with only that in mind.
Right.
And you see all kinds of dumb things. And I mean, some multi-links are quite good, but other ones are like, like the early 90s Nissan ones, for instance, where they have like 40% anti-squat, and they're horrible. And
so that people understand how would you design a multi-link with anti-squat in it? What would you do?
So you have your forward instant center, I guess. So it's the point in space where the suspension kind of arcs around.
Okay.
And if that point is above the center of gravity, the car will go up when you apply driving force.
Okay.
And if it's below, the car will like squat down.
Okay.
So you see some cars with the links like that.
Okay.
That has a lot of anti.
All right.
And you see the fronts of the cars with the links like that. That's a lot of anti-dive.
All right.
So I really hate that because, I mean, to me, like the car can't find its mechanical grip when it has this torque-dependent,
artificial relationship,
decreasing thing. So the controls don't have the linear feel as a driver.
Right.
And like I said, no bespoke pure race car has any of that.
Certainly. What's interesting is if you were to talk to any Porsche driver, and I'm teeing this up for you to help dispel what I'm about to say, the misunderstanding. So I'm in my Porsche and it's got a rear engine. And when I hit the gas, I get lots of traction. So wouldn't that mean that my car doesn't have anti-squat because it actually is squatting when I hit the gas?
No, they actually have kind of a lot. The multi-link ones.
Okay. But it still goes down. But you're saying it would go down more if they didn't have that.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
And because of the heavy rear weight bias, they take off pretty good despite all that.
Sure.
I wonder if this is so in the 99. All the cars in the back have a tension rod, just like in the front. Mm-hmm. On the lower, similar lower control arm setup as the front, where you have the control arm and then the tension arm. Yep. And then you have the two other upper links.
Yep.
So they've been increasing the length of that lower tension arm throughout the years, from 996, 997 to 991 to 992. They've just increased it by about 2 inches.
Get longer and longer wheelbase. That's been longer and longer and longer.
Well, even all the upper links are moving rearward, but then it's like they kept that front pivot point the same.
Okay.
But the attachment point on the knuckles is the same. So it's like they just increased that front inner.
So it doesn't ramp up, the anti doesn't ramp up as fast.
Yeah, so I was kind of wondering if that's what the...
So they've been slowly trying to dampen the effects of the anti over time?
I mean, you can even
by extending the moment arm, essentially?
Well, I mean, like with Nissan, like you look at the late 80s car, like the Z32, R32, S13, they have a ton of rear anti. Mm-hmm. The next generation, like the S14, has a lot less. The next generation, like the S15, has very little. And then you look at the generations of GTR, they get less and less and less, to where the R35 hardly has any in the back. And, so I think there's a trend to get away from that now.
Okay.
I just know the Nissans really well.
Sure.
And like the Z33 and 34, and like they all get less anti as they go in their evolution.
Sure. All right. So Porsche's starting to listen and move in the right direction, but not very quickly.
I think Porsche is very cautious when they change things.
Yeah, that's generally true. Except for this thing. They just pretty much threw everything at this car, it feels like.
There's a lot of...
Anything they could possibly think of, they threw at it, except a turbocharger. That's the only thing they didn't throw at it. Because I think everybody would have...
They saved that for the .2.
Yeah. The hybrid and the GT2 RS that's on its way. I think probably late next year. So we went through Camber, we went through Caster, we went through Tow, we went through why the Cayman rear is handicapped from Porsche. They could have done it better, but they chose not to. Sorry, Cayman guys. We went through multi-link. We went through why Mike doesn't like anti-anything. Mike's anti-anti. Would that make him positive? I don't know. The negative? You're generally a positive guy.
Well, the only thing that, I guess I take that back. There is one type of racing that does use a lot of anti-squat.
Drag racing?
Yeah, like Pro Stock, Pro Mod.
Yeah.
The 4-link rear cars.
Okay.
And, they have their racing slick with the big floppy sidewall.
Yep.
So they use the large amounts of anti to slam the tire into the surface to help launch the car.
Okay. Kind of like...
Yeah, they're doing that with the rear axle and the pinion angle. So under the rotation...
it really sets a hard torque into it?
Axle rotates, and then that rotation with the control arm pushes it down and
goes
back.
All right.
So if you ever see a really hooked up Pro Stock car, like it almost like leaps upward.
Sure.
And that's all the anti, and it's like kind of doing a wheelie, but it's kind of going up in the back, and it just takes off.
One of the big takeaways that I don't want to escape this conversation is we get asked a lot, what are the alignment numbers? What is the best geometry for my car. What is the, and I was like, okay, time out. Hold on. There is no there is no best. There is.
It's the famous engineering thing you say when someone asks you that. You say, it depends.
Exactly. It depends. And the reason I want it to depend for all of you who are listening is it does depend. It depends on the tire. It depends on the racetrack. It depends on your capabilities as a driver. Mostly the third one, more so than the first two.